9 podcasts.
Emissions standards. What do they mean for you driving a new car or buying a new car? This is the Drive Podcast. Thanks for listening again. Trent Nikolic with you in Sydney. James Ward with you in Melbourne. Wardy, thanks for joining us, mate. I don't complain about having 500 things to do in a week because I know you've got about 510 at least, maybe more. But you've taken time out of your busy schedule to yabber with me on the Drive Podcast. So I thank you for that, mate. Welcome. And as we always do, please tell me, please tell the listeners what it is that you might have driven into the studio.
It is lovely to be here. It's been a few weeks. I've been listening dutifully as
That's good.
first time, long time listener, first time caller kind of thing.
Yeah. Don't be nervous. Don't be nervous.
Do you know what? Can I just give a bit of a shout out that your two most recent seat partners in Roberto and Purse.
Yes.
Bloody hell, where was that talent hiding? Enjoyed both immensely. So, look, it is good to be here. And I am on my, today is the last time I will be doing this, but I have driven in the Volvo XC60 T8 plug-in hybrid for the very last time because it's about to go back to Volvo.
Yes.
And for the listeners, I've had this for about the last 2 months or so.
Yes.
And I have been keeping, now this is how exciting my life is. People think, James, when's the movie coming out of your life? I've got on my photo reel on my phone, I have
You're tragic.
a never-ending reel of, and I'll show the camera, of Volvo instrument cluster photos. So what I've been doing, and this is, so strap in for this, everybody. This is the exciting life that we lead. Affleck to play me in the movie.
Yes.
So I've been keeping a diary of the plug-in hybrid because, crazily, and this may come as a shock to a lot of people, but if you plug in a plug-in hybrid every day.
What a revelation.
Which is like weird, right?
Yeah.
Really weird.
Why would you do that?
You plug in your plug-in hybrid.
Yes.
It doesn't use any petrol for your standard commuting. So the Volvo's got somewhere between 50 and 60 Ks electric only range. I plug it in every day at work and I have been keeping a diary on when I've used it. And there's been a couple of times I've needed to go further afield or I've been just in circumstances caught out without being able to plug it in every single day and it has tipped over into the petrol. But I've had, I think it's been a bit over 2 months, to be honest. I still am on my initial tank of fuel that has over 200 kilometres left of range.
Yes.
So I've done 2,000 Ks roughly in the car. So that's, 2,000 Ks on less than a tank of fuel while plugging it in. And I know people are going to say, but you pay for that electricity and all that sort of stuff. Realistically, so it's a smallish battery in the car. I think it's about 18 kilowatt hour battery at corporate off-peak rates. So this one, just for you, Trent, I'm not actually paying for the electricity. We're in a car park. We're in a multi-story car park. And one of our spots just happens to have a PowerPoint next to it that nobody else can see. So I just sort of jam it in there.
Yeah, just slide it into that one.
That's it, just the tip. It goes in every day and we are recharging that Volvo every single day. So look, it should be an interesting thing. We'll be able to create some really nice and colourful charts because everyone loves charts and graphs.
We love charts.
Just to see. But fundamentally, the outcome of this is if you have a plug-in hybrid and you plug it in, it's a really, really good solution. So I will be bidding farewell to the lovely little Volvo either later today or first thing tomorrow morning, and I will miss it. It's a good car. I love the stereo. That's my favourite thing, that 15-speaker Bowers & Wilkins jobby where you can change the 3D stereo. Oh, man.
Yeah, the two things that stand out for me about Volvo generally, and I know people are going to find this strange, are their seats. Specifically, the seat comfort is unbelievable. I reckon it's as good as any in the industry. And the other one is their audio systems. When Volvo puts a high-end audio system in a car, it's a high-end audio system. It's fantastic.
This is the thing. If you get the seats and the stereo right, you forgive so many other things because you are fundamentally comfortable and everything is good. And you crank up some, I was running some Zepp, like trying to sort of connect with my, loud music youth there where you'd play, remasters up loud on repeat because you were... Well, you were too young to have bought the albums when they came out and thought you were cool at the time by buying that the double album remaster set back in the 90s is pretty much the way I want to say it. But listening to that, you put it on the stage audio and it sounds like, Page and Plant are up there having a crack. John Bonham's back on the drums. It's a really good thing. But anyway, that's what I drove in. What did you drive in?
Well,
let's turn the tables.
Okay, I'll tell you It's going to be a long one. So what I was actually driving this morning was a Kia EV6, which we're using for a TV production we're putting together on, unsurprisingly, electric vehicles. But
Weird.
I left that at the office, and what I drove into the studio right now was cutting-edge technology, let's just put it that way, in the form of a 1984 Nissan Gazelle, which was known around the world as an S12 Silvia.
Yeah, the Silvia, the first Silvia.
Precursor to S13, 14, 15. Now, the reason that I was driving it, and if you're listening and you don't care, that's fine. Tune out for a moment. If you're listening and you do care,
press that skip forward 15 seconds button
that's
just
right.
a couple of times. That's all
if you
need.
do care, you're going to see a bit of a story about this on the website because so I did something that I encourage nobody to do. In all of the radio stuff that we do, people always ring up and ask about buying cars, and I say, don't ever buy a car sight unseen. So I did that. Don't ever buy a car interstate without having had a good look at it. I did that. Don't ever buy a car without getting someone that you know to have a look at it. So I did that. And then a mate and I flew to Adelaide, where the car was, and drove a 39-year-old car with 147,000, give or take, kilometres on it, back to Sydney. Whereupon I made the mistake of telling the aforementioned Rob Margate what I was doing on my days off, and he said, well, can you take some photos because I think that'll make an interesting story. So then, of course, as you would have done, I started measuring and recording fuel figures and all that kind of stuff, and I can tell you that on the 13 to 1,400 kilometre drive back to Sydney, that 39-year-old car with nearly 150,000 Ks on it averaged 7.4 litres per 100, did
That's
not
pretty good.
miss a beat, and ran faultlessly the whole way back. And the only thing I've done since I got it back to Sydney, apart from the oil and filter, was have the air conditioning regassed. And I can tell you, having just driven it into the studio now, the air conditioning is freezing. So it's working well.
It's a similar kind of thing. When I picked up that Peugeot during COVID.
I recall it well.
Again, it was unnecessarily cheap, and I feel that is always there's red flag number one. It was out of state.
Yeah.
It was remote. There was nothing sensible about it. Had not driven it. No inspection.
Yeah,
no nothing. You know, the guy wasn't even home. He left the keys with a neighbour. And the idea that I could take that $1,500 Peugeot with 320,000 Ks on it just cheerily back to Melbourne in the hope that it survived, which it did, right? Like, and it ran really well. I think it was about 8 litres per 100. Like, I think it was a good thing. It proceeded to then obviously explode in grandiose fashion a bit later, but it made that trip really well. So I want to suggest that people do this.
Yes.
You know, if there's a car that you see and it's on Gumtree and it's out in the middle of nowhere and you think, geez, if only I could go and get that and bring it back, that'd be a bit of an adventure and I'd really like it. Go and do it.
Spot on, mate. Spot on.
What's the worst thing that can happen is that it can catch fire and burn to a husk on the side of the road.
Yep.
And won't you have a story to tell?
Absolutely.
Is the
and
summary.
that's the point. Right there is the point. I
live life.
Yeah, I cajoled my mate into coming with me. I got 2 cheap tickets on a flight down there one evening. The accommodation, we had one night in Adelaide, then one night in Hay, just over the New South Wales border, which is a great country town. On the way back, the hotels were cheap. You know, country motels are $120 a night or something. You pay for the fuel, you pay for a couple of nights accommodation, and you have an adventure. You know, you really
have an adventure.
You have an adventure whether you make it or you don't make it. Because if you make it, it's an adventure. And if you don't make it, that's part of the adventure, like you said.
Can I tell you a story of one of these that didn't go to plan?
Please do, because I've had a few.
Years ago, I went to go and buy, it would have been Lada Niva number 2. And it was up in Maryborough.
That's where you've explained to the listeners the kind of person that we're dealing with here. It wasn't Lada, it wasn't Niva, it was number 2.
Number 2. Well, you know we're on number 6 now, which is even worse.
The one you got now is a good one, though. I like it.
It was up in Maryborough, right? So that's a long way from Melbourne. And I didn't have booked leave or anything. And I worked out that if I flew up there on Friday after work and picked up this car, which I bought late night on eBay, you know, it was cheap, it seemed okay, I could get it back. Like if I basically barreled back from Maryborough and barely stopped to sleep, I could be back in Melbourne in time for work on the Monday. So I'm thinking, this is it, saddle up, great adventure, let's go. So I land there, I go out to the place where it is, and the guy has started to pull apart the brake master cylinder he said, I thought I'd give the car a check over before you drive it home, and I pulled apart the brake master cylinder and it's collapsed and we can't put it back together again because we're missing a key part and there's nothing. And that was it. This car had no brakes. Like, we tried and we fixed it. We were there for hours trying to fix this master, and all the time I'm thinking, yeah, I can still make it. It was a no-go. And I, of course, didn't have a return ticket. I didn't have a way back out of Maryborough. So the trick would be, my suggestion is, if you do this, once you make the decision to buy the car, tell whoever is selling it not to touch it, and don't try and help.
Yes.
Just, leave it be, and you'll come and create the adventure for you. As it was, I had to get a truck down. It was a total disaster. I got rid of it pretty much straight away, but it was life. But that's it. It's an adventure, right?
It is an adventure. Make sure you do it. If you've had that kind of adventure, send us in an email. Let us know. We love hearing your stories, just largely to see if you're as crazy as we are, because we do some stupid stuff that's probably better that we didn't do, but we do it. So if you have done it, send us in an email and let us know. Mate, on to the news of the week. This is pulsating stuff for the average Australian. This is stuff that's going to keep people awake at night because, they're either excited by it or it makes no sense to them. Emissions targets, there's been a lot of talk about it. I can feel people falling asleep already. I have very real concern, and I've been saying this since as far back as when Bill Shorten ran for Prime Minister and started yabbering about electric cars being charged in 5 minutes in the next few years. And here we are, 7 or 8 years later, and they still can't be charged in 5 minutes. I have a real concern, a very real concern, when anything to do with motoring like this becomes a political football or a political issue. Unfortunately, because of the environment, that is exactly what's happened. And consequently, governments, potential governments, oppositions are making all these proclamations with the Australian public none the wiser as to what it'll actually mean, I think.
I agree. This is sort of, I usually stay out of politics.
Yeah, I try to as well.
It's not my wheelhouse. Yeah. Know your strengths, as they say in life. When it comes around on Trivial Pursuit, I'll take the science questions, the literacy questions, not the politics questions, not for me. But what kind of got me a bit, I'm going to say pissed off, right? Like it really was affecting me this week. Well, last week, and I'm a pretty chill person, was every man and his dog getting up on the soapbox. And what was the line that kept getting rolled out? Australia will become a dumping ground for gas guzzlers.
That's right.
Unless we sign up to these accords. With the idea that you endorse and bring on fuel efficiency standards. The other part of that was, and it will make available a wave of cheap electric vehicles to the Australian public. Now, I can see what they're saying. That is, your average punters out there going, oh my God, we better do this because we don't want to become a dumping ground for gas guzzlers, and I want a wave of cheap electric cars to come through, so all good. Now, let's be clear, right? Like, fuel efficiency standards are a good thing. This
100%.
was a good thing for us to do.
100%.
But this is a decoupled argument from what cars we do or don't get. And the fact they've put them together and made them the same problem. Fuel efficiency standards were an important part of Australia being a first world country. We need to be on the same playing field as other leading nations around the world as we start to move forward. My analogy for this one is airbags, right? So you look back in the 90s when airbags started to sort of become important. Australia pretty much made it impossible for you to bring in a car because we made safety such a big thing.
Correct.
You
Still
put
is.
airbags in your cars or you weren't in the conversation. It was a massive step. We stepped up in the name of the betterment of cars and the betterment of drivers by saying this is an important thing. Now, there are still countries in the world that don't have the same level of safety equipment that we do, or they don't have driver-side airbags even in some cars. So I look at the fuel efficiency standards in the same way. We need to adopt this because it moves everything on. It moves everything forward. But this idea of if we don't, suddenly car manufacturers who don't build cars here go, wacko, we can engineer a car that is right-hand drive, so only capable to sell in 25% of the markets around the world, meets stringent Australian design requirements because we're different to everywhere else in the world. It probably has basically all the bells and whistles on it, in terms of safety, but also is a horrendously bad polluting thing. Let's put a coal-fired power plant under the bonnet and make this the worst car in the world for the environment so that we can sell it into Australia. So that concept, even hearing me say it, is just, it's beyond ludicrous.
It's so dopey, mate. Look, it's so dopey. The first thing is, if there's politicians listening now, and you know what, half of them, when they're talking about cars, they've got no idea what they're talking about. So it'd probably be good if they did listen to this podcast. But if you're listening, first of all, they're not gas guzzlers. We don't call it gas in Australia. We're not America. So they're not gas guzzlers. That's the first thing. The second thing is this assertion that we're going to be a dumping ground for inefficient vehicles is being put forward by the manufacturers, I would say, first of all, and the politicians have picked up on it, because manufacturers in Australia can't really flex their muscle enough to get the cars they want here. So they're getting what they're getting at the moment, right? But the reality is, I've seen some absolute nonsense in the press in the last couple of weeks about this and about what this would mean for Australia. For argument's sake, when a manufacturer tells me, the reason that we don't sell electric vehicles here, as many of them as we could, is because these regulations don't exist. I don't know if you're allowed to swear on this podcast, but I say bullshit, because the reality is we are a tiny market at the end of the earth that happens to be right-hand drive, which happens to be outside of India, just about nobody else around the world, and they're not building them. They can't build enough of them. There's a waiting list for them already with nothing to do with these particular regulations. And the final point I'll make before you go into it a bit more is that if you're talking about a market like England or Germany, their own governments are going to say to them in 2030, you can't build cars here that aren't electric anymore. Therefore, what are they going to build to send to Australia to make us a dumping ground? They're not going to be able to build them.
This is my point. Every single car that we get is built somewhere else in the world,
Correct.
right? We don't have any cars built here. So you take a European manufacturer like Mercedes-Benz. They're building cars for a global market, which means those global markets who already have fuel efficiency standards, we're getting the same engines that already conform to the fuel efficiency standards that those other brands have.
Absolutely.
You look at, and I'll touch on Toyota in a second, but you look at Kia and Hyundai, so two of our top brands in Australia. We get every single electric car that they make currently that's already here. We are going to be getting more hybrids and more things. The cars that they have that we don't, and people sort of will pick the one that is available in some markets but not here. It's because it's probably not engineered for right-hand drive.
Correct.
And I know that sounds like a silly thing to say, but it's a massive part of the manufacturing process to have two dashboards and two setups, and you've got two suspension setups and two dynamic setups for these different cars. And while many brands will dual engineer, some of them are saying, we know Australia buys certain types of cars. So and this is kind of leads into the other one with the affordable electric cars. The idea that we're going to get some of those pint-size, 30 kilowatts, basically kids' toys with number plates that you get in some of the European and Asian markets, no one would buy them. No one's buying fuel-efficient microcars in Australia to begin with. Yep. Having those as electric, you may get a bit of a niche, but it's not a volume market. So it's not worth doing the right-hand drive engineering.
I had a debate with someone the other day who was saying, well, if you paid attention to the fact that in the next couple of weeks, India is going to become the most populous nation on earth and they right-hand drive. And I said, I can tell you, having been to India and having driven on the road, driven some of the cars and looked at the cars that are on the road, outside of the ones that we get, you do not want an Australian market flooded with cheap Indian electric vehicles.
Mate, there's no safety.
No, that's exactly right.
They're not going to meet our safety standards. This is the
not.
thing. That's the thing they're not going to meet. It's not to do with a fuel efficiency standard. They are not going to meet our safety standards. And if you've got a car that's like these days, we're seeing ANCAP make it harder and harder and harder to get a 5-star car. And we've got basically the talk track has been for the last X number of years, 5 stars or nothing. You've got some pretty good cars that are still at 4-star, but so many of these cars that are from other markets, because of their size, because of the technology that's on them, they wouldn't even get that. So you're going to end up, is that what we want? Are we saying we are willing to forego safety in order to have basically tiny electric vehicles move to the Australian market? Because as these brands evolve and as the product gets better across the board, we are going to start to see cars at the right sizes from the right brands, soon to be at the right price. I reckon this year will be, I think towards the end of the year, we know that MG have got the MG4, what is it? The high spec long range is $47,000.
Yep.
So there is a low spec standard range car of that could very well get to the $39,990 price. Like we're not saying that it is. We don't know that it will be, but that or the little GWM Aura in a lower range or a lower spec version, we may do it. But the thing, what we're hearing is people want a Tesla Model 3, a $60,000 car for $25,000, and it's like that's great, but I'd like a 5-bedroom house for $500,000. It's not going to work.
I'd like an Aventador for $50,000, but they're 1.1 million. Yeah.
So I want to be clear. I think it's a good thing that we have adopted a fuel efficiency standard moving forward. I think it is a good pathway forward. It does keep us in the same leagues as other nations. It puts us on that same talk track as other nations. So for that, it's good. We are not going to become a dumping ground for gas guzzlers. Those cars don't exist. Okay, so let's be really clear. As for will it open up the floodgates of affordable electric cars, just today, GM in the US has cancelled their most affordable electric car because people are buying bigger ones. Yep. So the Chevy Bolt, which was never engineered in right-hand drive, but was always the one, it'd be amazing if we could get it, is getting axed because they're going to start building a slightly larger SUV that's more profitable. Yep. So shock horror, a commercial car company is doing things that best suit their commercial bottom line.
They wouldn't be trying to make money, would they?
Heaven forbid. So, yeah, look, I think the thing is that this, like so many new things and so many changing things, this is a massive new area of technology for the automotive industry. It is evolving hugely quickly. Like every week we have a new news story about new things and new technology and new approaches. It is moving fast, but it doesn't move overnight.
No.
And just be patient. Just watch, read, stay up to date with all the things that are happening. If you want an electric car right now, there are some amazing options on the market available in Australia, as they are everywhere else in the world, that you can buy today at a competitive price. If you want something that's newer, cheaper, just wait. We all have to wait. Just relax. And
absolutely. Absolutely. Very quickly, mate, before we go to the break, completely at the other end of the spectrum, Land Rover Defender 130. It's going to get a supercharged V8 before it moves into a fully electric future. Now, talking about affordable vehicles, it's going to be $237,000 before on-road costs.
And you know what? There will be a line out the corner and around the block.
Won't be able to get enough of them.
So this is the funniest thing. And look, it's kind of bad, but it's also kind of ironic. This is what we laugh at. You've got these people jumping up and down complaining, we're going to be these horrible gas guzzlers everybody needs. Meanwhile, Land Rover goes, well, hang on a minute. While we can still slap a supercharged V8 into the long bum, because it's not a long wheelbase, it's the long bum Defender now that nobody really needs anyway, and just go, the hell with it. Let's have a bit of fun.
When you look at a Defender, you think to yourself, I need 368 kilowatts, 610 Newton meters, and I need to get to 100 in 5.7 seconds. That's what you think, isn't it?
Do you know, the thing is, though, is I do laugh at these, and I know a couple of people who've got the regular V8 Defender.
Yes,
and it's the because I can, not the because I should. We all know the better cars are the lower, like that. The 3 litre 6 is just a peach of an engine in that car. It's all you need. Sensible heads prevail. We know the bulk sellers are there, but it's like the G-Wagon where that G63. Nobody in the universe needs that car. No. And yet there is a waiting list of infinity years for it. So I think the mindset is it kind of doesn't matter what it is. And again, let's be clear. When we're talking volumes, these are low volume cars, so everybody can relax. So I know you're about to write a letter to Dear Trent.
Don't do it.
I found it terrible that you're endorsing this car.
You're the Antichrist.
These are low volume cars, so just everybody calm down.
Deep breath.
But far out.
You're going to need to take a deep breath, and you're going to need to get the smelling salts out, because after the break, Wardy and I are going to tell you why Nurburgring lap records are irrelevant and a waste of time and nobody cares. So stay tuned to the Drive podcast. We'll be back right after the break. Welcome back to the Drive Drive podcast. Trent Nicolich and James Ward with you. I promised this before the break, Wardy. I'm going to say it now. I'm going to go out on a limb. I can feel it creaking and groaning under my weight. It's about to snap. People are going to be upset. I've said for a while, I'll say it again, Nurburgring lap records are a waste of time for anything other probably than like GT3 RS Porsches and track cars, proper track cars. I've been to a bunch of track days around Australia. I'm yet to see a Civic Type R at one of them. And now, after setting a front-wheel drive lap record at the Nurburgring, there are allegations that Honda might have cheated its lap record around the Nurburgring, which I think is irrelevant because the lap record was irrelevant in the first place.
Yeah, look, and this is the thing. To say that a manufacturer is cheating by improving the car slightly, what have they done? They've gone for the RS spec of basically taking out the radio and the air conditioner, and from all accounts, there's potentially a bit of boost changes, and there might be a slightly shorter gear or whatever it is. Yeah. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because we know that these things, it's like a 0 to 100 time. And you see people go, oh, why didn't you buy this car? Because that does 0 to 100 in that. No one cares. No one ever uses this. It doesn't matter. All it is. Do you know what? I put it up there with 3.5 ton towing. It's no one actually does this to do it. Yeah. So the Nurburgring time, look, I don't think they're completely irrelevant because it does set that sort of semi-benchmark. And I like a Nurburgring time over a quarter mile or something because it's a pretty sustained level of performance. You know, we've all sat on the couch and done that on Gran Turismo or whatever, and I can't do a 7-minute lap without sticking something expensive into a wall. But the important thing is it sets that kind of comparative mindset of how does something go over a longer period of time. But what I do agree completely with you that arguing over so-and-so cheated, do you know what? Do you know how they cheat? Is they put a professional driver in that car.
Yeah, that's cheating to start with. Get you and I to do it.
Mate, could you imagine, right? Like, I would love to see Porsche just go, let's set a Nürburgring regular person lap time. And you give them a Macan with curbed wheels and a baby seat in the back and a whole bunch of unnecessary stuff in the boot. And make her put the radio on, be on a phone call.
Partner screaming at them to slow down.
And see how how quickly they can go around the Nürburgring. And there is your new benchmark because that's then a relative to the rest of us. So,
and before we move on, my favourite one, it's off topic a little bit. So, who cares if Honda cheated or didn't? And the cheating is different tyres, lightweight parts, whatever it is, who cares? My favourite one around the Nürburgring was when Porsche had its lap record broken by the Lambo, I think it was the Huracan of a variant thereof.
This was the Superleggera one. What's that called?
Yeah, Superleggera.
The orange one.
That's right. Yeah, and Porsche engineers said, the Italians.
Performante.
The Italians, they cheat. They're cheaters. And of course, knowing what we know about emissions out of Germany, they never cheat anything, the Germans. So I think they were standing on a very flimsy pedestal, let me tell you.
It was one of those things, even in club level motorsport, the mindset that all cars are equal. You'd race in a class and lo and behold, people with deep pockets would always seem to be a bit faster because even though, all I'm allowed is an exhaust and tyres in this category, no one's cracking the engine block to see those forged pistons and do it. Like it's just such a non-necessary thing. I would suggest, in my mind, the fairest motorsport in the world, the only real fair motorsport in the world is Carrera Cup because the cars are the same.
Built by Porsche,
Porsche build them, Porsche maintain them, Porsche drop them to the track, all that kind of stuff. Yep. It is literally down to the bag of meat in the driver's seat on how that car goes. And that's the real test. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, look, Civic Type R is fast. There you go. Water's wet, sky's blue. Well
don't
done.
Don't take SUVs onto the Nürburgring because we don't care.
Who cares?
Yeah,
Who cares?
We don't care.
Just quickly, I reckon I'd be faster with the stereo with a good song on.
Playing Led Zeppelin. Yeah, right? You're probably right.
No, I reckon you'd Motley Crue it or something like that. You'd really amp it.
But you'd need a Led Zeppelin or a Queen song to give you 7 minutes worth. See, this is the problem.
Yeah, well, that's right. You'd want a massive solo, but also too, right? Like the weight saving of pulling the stereo out versus the guy who's driving basically being, given a whole block of chocolate laxettes in the morning and basically drained before. Let's really call it out. So, I agree.
Let's move on to something a little bit more important. And harking back to what we were saying earlier in the podcast, I thought this was a pretty strong statement from Toyota. They've come out and they've said that they're ready. High-ranking Toyota Australia executive has rejected accusations the company's lobbied against vehicle emissions reduction targets and says it's ready to meet any of the future mandates. Now, I've said before on the podcast, Wardy, I've spoken to you about this before, I don't think Toyota gets enough credit for selling tens of thousands of hybrid vehicles in this country. And effectively, I know you could argue that the Honda hybrid was first, give or take, but Toyota in this country at least, and certainly in countries like the United States, has sold a hell of a lot of hybrid vehicles that have halved the fuel use of those vehicles. And I don't think they get enough credit for that. And I think, judging by this, because Toyota's, the new car market leader and has been for 20 years, I think this is a really strong statement to say we're ready to go. Well,
this was the thing, right? Like we saw when the Land Cruiser changed from the 200 to the 300 and it dropped the twin turbo V8 and moved to that 6-cylinder engine. Part of that was because of fuel emissions, because the old V8 is the one that's probably the most questionable of any Toyota power plants, and that's now only in the 70 series, which has now been reclassified as a light truck. So it kind of doesn't have to fall into line in the same way.
That's right.
But look, I totally agree with this. I think Toyota, I've read so many stories basically putting Toyota out to burn on this. And, okay, they're not building full electric cars at this point. We're getting the BZ4X a bit later on this year. That's their first full EV. But all you need to do is look outside at all of the Camry hybrid taxis. It wasn't that long ago where they were all 6-cylinder Falcons and Commodores. Sure, they were running an LPG conversion on them, but the idea that you've got this turnkey solution for a global market car that is a 4-cylinder, super efficient, and we keep saying it's a thoughtless hybrid. Like, you do not have to even remember that it is a hybrid. You just get easy fuel efficiency. You don't have to try. It just happens. Right. And the fact that your RAV4 looks like every other RAV4, your Kluger looks like every other Kluger, your Corolla looks like every other Corolla. I think every single one of their compact models now has a hybrid option in it, and people are asking about them first and foremost. The problem is there's just a really long wait list because they are the ones that are most in demand. People care, and Toyota provides this product. The idea that, they're not full electrics, and Toyota is working on that. And we've seen there's been a bit of internal Toyota position change from we're concentrating on hybrids to we will have full EVs coming very soon. They have, for the last 20-odd years, basically owned that hybrid space. And I know there have been other cars, but they have really, really owned it and doubled down and created a solution that if you go and buy a hybrid from other brands now, I'm not saying they're bad, but they're not as good as the Toyota. It is absolutely the benchmark in that sort of space. And while Europe or parts of Asia may work really well with high density, low distance, full electric, makes so much more sense there than it does here or in the US. The hybrid platforms, and certainly that Toyota has been championing, make so much sense for Australia. And simply buying a hybrid Kluger versus a 3.5 litre V6 Kluger, surely that is a better solution. And I think this is the way forward, and this is what they're doing. So I don't find it surprising that Toyota said they can meet those efficiency standards, because I dare say that that's what they've been working toward. I know that they're pushing towards full electric because there is a lot of market pressure for doing that. But I don't agree with calling them out as being the bad lobbyists. So I feel they've been doing the most behind the scenes to really push it. And look, I can tell now we're going to get an email or a thing to say we're on the take and Toyota's greasing our pocket. Far from it. No. Just look outside. Yeah. Look how many Toyota hybrids there are and consider what they have replaced and how easy they are and how well suited they are to that urban driving. It makes so much sense.
So I said tens of thousands, Wardy. They've put 20 million electrified hybrid cars on the road globally. And globally. And I said tens of thousands in Australia.
When's your maths podcast out, Trent?
1 + 1 = 5. Yeah, that's right. It's like, what was that show, Beyond 2000?
I'm thinking more the Curiosity Show.
Yeah, Curiosity Show. I like that. Was that the one with the little robot on the desk, or no, that's something else.
Yeah. With Rob and Dean, that robot. Yeah.
330,000 hybrids in Australia. 330,000. So, that's 330,000 cars on the road in Australia using half as much fuel as they otherwise would.
That is exactly right. And so, look, okay, we all agree they're not full electric. We know that. But completely to your point, that is 330,000 cars that are effortlessly more efficient. And that's good.
Absolutely, mate. It is. I can't just wait any longer. I need to get into the garage and get back into the S12 Silvia or Nissan Gazelle. So unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap that up for today.
You know what? It's nice to come on. And you know what? We probably need to. And I know that it is topical to talk about all things electrical and fuel efficiency and things like that. But I actually think we should probably, for our next time around, come up with a really fun story and not really be let's dial down the politics and dial down the soapbox.
Well, I tell you what, mate, on that point, if you're an environmentalist, the ultimate environmentally friendly way to drive a car is to drive a 40-year-old car like a Nissan Gazelle that's paid its debt back to the environment a million times over and still only uses 7.5 litres per 100. That's not far off the hybrids we were just talking about.
I'd actually think it would be good to look at that life cycle of when a vehicle really does become hits its neutrality point of having put in the hard yards and everything.
Yeah.
But look, do you know what? The thing is too, it's an exciting and interesting time because I think for the first time in certainly my experience, automotive is a number one dinner party kind of conversational topic, water cooler, whatever, right?
It's a really good point.
We're at front and center of people's minds at the moment, which is actually makes this a really interesting place to be working at the moment in terms of what is happening and what is coming and where are we going? Because look, we know currently top 3 cars. We should have new sales results in about a week, but it is Ranger, Hilux, Model 3. Mm-hmm. Who would have seen that coming?
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Pretty impressive.
It is impressive.
To see can we keep that momentum going? We've got more chatter of new brands looking into Australia. Like we were sort of talking, I think a couple of weeks, Chery's back. They've got some EVs coming. Mahindra's back. They never left, but they're sort of mainstream back. But they've got some EVs coming. There are some new brands looking. It keeps this conversation fun and interesting and exciting. And then we can go back to talking about crapbox Nissans and old Peugeots that we've recovered from garages. And I think this is what it's about. And I think if someone wants to buy a crapbox Peugeot, maybe we can turn this into a transactional platform. Maybe sell your shitbox.
Yeah, sell your shitbox on the Drive podcast. I've got more than one. Thank you for joining me again this week, mate. Real privilege to have you on. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm heading back to the office now. There's lots and lots and lots on at the moment.
There's a dinner party where someone wants to interrogate you about electric cars. Thank you for listening to the Drive podcast. Don't forget, as I always say at the end of every week, you need to subscribe wherever you're listening to the Drive podcast so you stay up to date with all of our latest podcast information and releases. Trent Nikolic and James Ward signing out for another week, and I will talk to you again next week for the Drive.